Why, hello there, and welcome to this video. If you have been following the news, then you might be aware that the Supreme Court made a decision recently that essentially allows the Trump administration to implement the transgender military ban that they have been so desperately wanting for so long. I decided that this would be really important. I decided that it would be really important to hear from a trans service member who would be able to speak about how this ban will affect people, what it means for the military moving forward, all of those great, wonderful questions. So I put out my feelers and I found a wonderful candidate for this interview. So I'm not going to beat around the bush for too long here. Let's just go ahead and jump right in to the interview. I am here with Aurora, and we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the interview. So the first question is basically just to tell me a little bit about yourself in general.
Hi. All right. Before I answer that, I just need to say that I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I do not represent the United States Air Force or the Department of Defense or any other government entity. And all of the thoughts and feelings I express are my own tonight. But yeah, my name's Aurora. I'm 36 years old. I live in Vermont. I've been serving in the Air Force for my entire adult life. Transitioned a little bit later in life. I really just enjoy spending time with friends, getting out of the house, nature. Yeah, just a bunch of normal stuff, really.
Nice. Yeah. I also love like nature, getting out of the house and all that stuff. It's definitely a good time. I agree. So the first question, you sort of answered it, but go into a little more detail about how long you've been serving in the military.
Yeah, so I joined right out of high school. Had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. This recruiter came, kind of pitched this spiel, hey, you want to go to college for free? I was like, oh, yeah, sign me up. So July of 2007, I joined, which puts me at just under 18 years of service currently.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that is a definitely a good record. I think that, there's a lot of people that do their 4 years or whatever and they get out or do whatever. So yeah, tell me a little bit about what service has been like for you and what it has meant for you.
Sure. So it's been a really wild ride. I joined in the early 2000s, so there was a lot going on back then. I kind of went through basic training and then immediately started rolling into deployments over to the Middle East. But really, like, it gave me some structure in my life, and it kind of, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to get out on my own, start my life, and not kind of be bound by, anyone else, which ironically, the military has a lot of rules that do that. But it let me start my life and kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And turns out I just really enjoyed what I was doing. So I decided, uh, you know, benefits are great, but I'm going to make this my career. And yeah, that's kind of been it.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. I could see how, like, with the mix of good benefits and, if you already put some time in there, then, it kind of makes sense for a lot of people just to say, like, hey, I might as well just keep going with this thing that I've already started doing.
For sure. And it goes about 50-50. Some people, they do one enlistment and they're like, this isn't for me. They do their job and get out, and some people, make a career of it. So I ended up being a career person. I never would have thought that when I first joined. I was like, nope, just gonna do this, go to college. But the bonds that I made, and I saw a lot of value in what I was doing. So I kept doing it.
Okay, well, I can super appreciate that for sure. So the next question would be, when did you start your transition?
A little bit of backstory here. So I started my transition a little bit later in life. I realized that I was trans around 2018, 2019 timeframe. At that time in the military, you could not openly serve. It was the previous administration. There were some rules in place. Basically, if you had done the transition process prior to those rules being put in place, you were kind of grandfathered through, or they call it an exception to policy, basically. But if you hadn't, then you couldn't start the process and stay in. So then, kind of fast forward 2021, the executive order dropped that said that we could again serve openly, which was awesome. I'll never forget that night. I was literally I was in Vegas on a work trip. I got out of the shower and I just had a bunch of text messages from my one friend who kind of like knew me, and it was just like, hey, like, you can do this now. I was like, oh, awesome, super happy. And then I realized I'm about to go to Afghanistan. I can't do this right now. So it was a little bit of a back and forth, but But yeah, so I kind of had to get that deployment out of the way first, and then I was able to start my transition when I came home.
Oh, okay. I've heard people say this before, and I don't know. Maybe you can speak to this. I've heard people say that like one of the reasons that they think that trans people shouldn't be in the military is the need to have like medicine and stuff around. Like I've heard people say that before. Like, how are you going to serve the military while you're carrying around 17,000 vials of estrogen or whatever they say? Can you speak to that specifically?
So I can tell you, for me personally, I'm 100% deployable today. They could call me tomorrow and say, "Hey, you need to go do your job." I can go do it. If you were to remove everyone who is on a daily medication from the military, it would be hundreds of thousands of people. We take medications for all kinds of things, especially once you've gone through your initial contract, your first contract where you've been serving for a while. As time goes on, like during your career, you're going to have medical conditions that just come up. It's normal. There's a normal process for kind of evaluating that. We have, our medical teams that'll look at, all right, what medications do we have. Sometimes there's a waiver process involved. So I did make the choice to switch to pills instead of injections because that's just a lot easier for us to manage. But no matter what medication you're on, for me, if it's HRT, for some people, it could be, blood pressure medication, any, you name it, any condition that you could have. We're always required to keep at least a 90-day supply. And we would just take that with us, which for me is one bottle of pills that goes in my bag. I've deployed plenty of times with other medications. So it really, case by case basis, there may be certain cases where, it's a little bit more difficult, but it's no different than any other service member being on a medication.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. You hear that stuff from some people, and it's like you wonder if they know that like other people in the military are on medicine at all. Like people take medicine; it's like a normal thing, and so like of course the military is prepared for that.
Sure, and even hormones. There are plenty of cis men in the military that are on like testosterone because they might just have low testosterone, or same thing, cis women who may have, some sort of endocrine issue. Like that's not a disqualifying factor. The biggest thing they look at medically is how does it impact, is it managed? And then they have a guide that they go off of. Now they did recently put changes into that guide, so they are making it a disqualifying thing, but we've been serving for years on those medications.
Right. Understandable. So I guess the next question would be, what has your experience been like being trans in the military?
So it hasn't really been what I expected. And by that, I mean, I expected it to be this huge thing. I expected there to be like a lot of pushback, a lot of like just kind of, I mean, I hate to say what it's been made out to be, but like I thought it was gonna be just painful. And it really wasn't. It was just, my peers had known me for years. I went through, there was a very specific process you had to follow. Like you can't just walk in and start HRT and say, hey, start calling me this. Like it was a very involved process. So I mean, that's the other thing is people don't just show up and transition. Like it took me a year just to get the proper approvals to start HRT. So there's a lot that went into it. But with that, like when it did happen, it was kind of like, okay, cool, you're still you, like, and it was, I mean, it was a huge weight off of my shoulders because, like I said, it took me a year. So this whole process, only select people that needed to know kind of knew what was going on with me. But yeah, for the most part, it was, it really it didn't impact anything. It was just, some people, a learning curve for some people, just getting used to it. But honestly, it was my work didn't really change at all. I was
Right.
happier. That was the big thing. I was happier.
Well, that's good. I appreciate that you spoke to how it was to go through the process, that it wasn't just an easy thing. It just wasn't just like a one day you swapped over and started your everything all at once. It was like a process that you had to go through to get approved for HRT and everything like that. Definitely appreciate that. And then I've also thought this to myself, which I feel like you kind of just confirmed. It feels like the military is more concerned about like operational standards, like what's going on in the moment with the job that needs done and the people that are doing it. Like ideally I would think that they're not spending a lot of time thinking about like, oh well, so and so is a woman, or so and so is a Like that shouldn't really even come into the equation during like an operation or anything like that. It's really just about like the skills and what needs done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, like I said, I've been doing this for almost 18 years. I've never been thinking about someone's pronouns when we were, trying to get the job done. It was focused on what we had to do, how we did it. It's in most cases, it's rank and last name. I mean, occasionally you throw out pronouns here and there, but honestly, like none of that matters when you're. I mean, even the day-to-day job, like when it's not a high stakes kind of like, hey, this has to get done. It never really comes up. I mean, there are standards that every single one of us that wear the uniform are required to meet, and you either meet them or you don't. This whole idea that this group of people wasn't meeting the standards, like I can't speak for again, I don't speak for the government, I can't speak for everyone, but I know for me personally, like I was always required to meet the same standards that I would have been regardless. For medical readiness, yes, when you start new medications, things like that, you go into a period. It's called they call it a profile in the Air Force. I'm not sure if other services do it, but basically it says from this date to this date, you're, say I had had a surgery or started a new medication until you are considered stable. They put you on this profile that limits what you can do. So it doesn't necessarily say you can't deploy. It might say like, hey, you need a waiver to deploy just to make sure. Whatever. I mean, I know things like that. That is the same across the board. If I had a shoulder surgery, same exact process. And you can be on that for up to a year. After a year, they start a medical evaluation process and start determining, prognosis. Are you going to be able to continue to serve? Again, that is across the board. So that standard has applied to us the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I feel like that's what I would expect. I feel like, it's the military. Like they're not just like doing stuff to do stuff. Like they're not just making up rules or making allowances for people just because or anything like that. Like it's all about the business, I would assume. So it kind of sounds like that's basically what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's like I said, I mean, there are, and I've seen it in like comments on posts and things like that where it's like, well, you have this whole group of people that it can never deploy. And that's just, I mean, it's not true. We would not be allowed to stay in if that were the case. That goes for, again, any condition. If you blow your knee out and get a knee replacement, but you still can't meet standards after that, eventually it results in a medical separation.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I was watching Jubilee just did another one of those videos where it's like one person versus 25 idiots or whatever. And it was one of the guys, one of his main points that he was trying to argue was that like if everyone's gay and trans, then there'll be no people to serve in the military. And it's just kind of this dumbfounding thing where it's like, have you met a trans person or a gay person? Because for a job or whatever, it's like being gay doesn't make you like 10% worse at working. Like that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's an unfortunate myth that people seem to buy into.
Yeah, for sure. I can tell you. I mean, I know there's been a huge swing lately of, everything needs to be merit based. I haven't seen anything that wasn't merit based. It's kind of, especially in the military and in, the profession of arms, like if you're not able to perform, you can't be in those positions. It's everything is so dependent on this whole machine kind of working the way that it works. Like, sticking me in some like high level position just because, I checked a box. Like it's not the way that it works.
Yeah, yeah, and I wish more people had that perspective because they would realize how silly those kinds of arguments sound to anyone that has any experience at all. So this is going to move now into the part of the conversation where we're going to talk about the ban. I mean, that's why we have gathered here tonight to talk about that because it's a very real thing that's happening. Just to give some context, an executive order was written, and the way that they worded it and described that being trans makes you somehow unfit to serve, unfit to deploy. I think they said stuff about like operational safety or something like that, but essentially they're trying to make it sound like if you're trans you are not able to or fit to serve in the military. What was your reaction when you saw this executive order, specifically the way that they worded it and the way that they were trying to go about it?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll be honest. I was expecting the executive order. I was expecting some sort of, restriction on trans service. It really shattered me when I saw the actual verbiage that was put into the executive order and the policies. There's some very specific verbiage in there that says things like lacking selflessness, lacking the discipline required for service. Things that are just kind of these blanket statements that have this idea of like dishonor associated with them. And many of us have been serving for, like myself included, for years and years. This isn't a new thing. Like the trans people serving openly has been back and forth a couple times now, going all the way back to the Obama administration. But even, like myself, like I was transitioned later in life, but again, I've been serving with honor for almost 2 decades. So to see those words, it really, it was pretty painful. And then especially when the policies dropped, because there was a little bit of a hope of like, okay, maybe they're going to say, hey, all right, you can't start this process if you haven't already. It's kind of what happened last time, that they said, if you've already done the process, all right. If you haven't started it, we're not allowing you to start it. And if you have transitioned but you haven't joined the military yet, you're no longer eligible to join. What we got was basically a complete blanket ban. It uses the diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So anyone who has a diagnosis, history of, or symptoms of gender dysphoria is just, there's a blanket disqualification. There is a waiver process that they put into that. It is a very, very specific waiver to meet. It's very hard criteria to meet. Almost none of us would meet it. Basically, says, you have to have served the last 36 months in your sex assigned at birth. You have to be able to prove that you've never attempted to transition, and you need to be in a critical career field. So I mean, those first kind of two for most of us automatically disqualify us from any kind of waiver. So I mean, really, what I looked at it as is, this is the end of my career. It was, yeah, it took kind of a day or two to really set in. I mean, like I said, we knew it was coming. Totally expected the challenges, the court cases, all of that stuff to come. But I mean, just seeing it laid out that way was kind of, yeah, it really, it was shattering to me.
Yeah, and I want to say, just take a moment to say that I'm really sorry that this is happening to you. I think it's disgusting. Like personally, when I read the executive order, I thought it was just as horrifying as you did. I mean, I'm sure it affects you more personally, so it's like, it's definitely more personal for you. But the fact that they're trying to say that trans people are not disciplined, like they don't have honor, they're selfish, that's ridiculous. That's like stereotyping at a level that's unbelievable. Like you're trying to say every single trans person on the face of this earth is selfish. That doesn't make sense. That's just like just an insult. Like it's not even like, it's not based in any study, it's not based in any fact, it's not based in any reality. It's just like a value statement that someone's making about trans people, generalizing an entire community of millions of people. It's really, it's crazy, honestly. I kind of expected a ban, and I expected it to be about medical transition and stuff, saying essentially, hey, if you're on hormones, you're not fit to serve because apparently that's somehow bad for you. They took it a step further and they just like added insult to injury, where they just wanted to make it, I think they just wanted to make it hurt and make it an insult to people who are serving proudly in our military and who have served for a long time. It's pretty dystopian, honestly.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was definitely much more aggressive than I had expected. I guess I really don't have any other words for it than that. It just, floored me, and just seeing that verbiage carry forward into, official military policy that is, it's the first time I've seen something like this kind of happen in my career, with policy being written in that way.
Yeah, like normally they try to hide the bigotry, but they didn't even bother this time. They were just like, "Oh, no, we just hate you."
Well, and I guess like there's normal processes in place for all of this. Like, I mean, medical standards do change in the military from time to time, and like it caught me off guard the way it's just like, if this, then you're out, period, dot. And without any kind of like actual medical evaluation to go along with it. So again, like normally, like I had kind of mentioned earlier, if I mean, I'll use another disqualifying condition, and it's not always, again, there's kind of like waivers for everything, but in general, like diabetes is a disqualifying condition for the military because of the requirement for insulin, the conditions in which insulin has to be stored. Like it's just not feasible to really be able to say I can deploy this person anywhere. You need to keep the medication cold, all of those extra things. So let's say that had kind of come up and I had a blood test done and they're like, oh, you're diabetic. Then I would go through this whole medical evaluation process. They would assess me, they go over the condition. It takes a long time. It is kind of a medical decision of you are or you're not fit to continue to serve. But this is kind of different where it's, we're saying we're going to use this basically a medical diagnosis, but we're not going to use that same process. We're just going to separate you.
Yeah. Yeah, that really does illustrate how it's treated way differently than other things that may be considered disqualifying. They're not even bothering to go through the process of like, well, maybe we should check if these people are fit to serve or anything like that. It sort of like removes like the secondary check that would prevent people from just being forced out of service right away, basically. Um,
Yeah.
so the next question is, will you be affected by this ban, and what will that look like for you?
So I will be affected by this ban. So not really sure how it's going to look for me yet. They kind of gave us two options with the policy. You can elect to voluntarily separate, or you can be involuntarily separated. So voluntary separation, the initial dates they gave us were back when it first started. We had to elect to do that by March. I want to say it was March 26th, but a little give or take on that. They just pushed out new dates because there was a federal injunction in place that kind of put everything on pause. So now it is for active components. They're giving us until June 6th, and then for reserve components, they're giving us until July 7th. To do that same election. Now, with the voluntary separation, they're kind of there's some stipulations with that. Which I mean, the big things are if you received a bonus, if you had transferred, like say your GI Bill, or there's a lot of benefits that we get that are tied to a service commitment. So basically, it says, all right, we're gonna, you know, a signing bonus is a perfect example of that. Some career fields, especially ones that it's hard to keep people in, they may give you a signing bonus. Back when I first joined in 2007, they gave me $20,000 to join. I've been in long enough that I don't really get those bonuses anymore. But for some of the newer people, or some of those career fields that are just really hard to keep people in, they might have gotten 90, $100,000. And one of the stipulations with that voluntary separation is, all right, if you voluntarily separate, you don't have to pay this money back. If you don't, then you may have to pay it back. They haven't come down and said you will, but that's a big gamble to take for someone who's losing their career. You're going to lose your career and put yourself in $90,000 of debt. Just my opinion on this. There is no right or wrong answer. It's each service member is going to have to make the choice that is best for them, their families, what makes sense to them. For me, I'm choosing not to voluntarily separate. We haven't seen the policy on that yet of what that's going to look like. I'm still waiting to see that. Specific impacts, I'm not sure. I mean, I can tell you, I'm in the same boat as all of the thousands of other service members that are going to be separated, where, this is my career. So, I'm losing my financial stability. I'm losing health benefits. I'm losing my pension, all of those things that I've kind of been working on. There are some different cases here and there where, like, if you're in a certain time window, you may be able to they're offering like early retirement. I don't meet all the requirements for that. So for me, I won't be able to retire. So it's basically just kind of at the end of the day, I ask myself, what am I going to be able to live with? What choice am I going to make that, I'll be able to look myself in the mirror and be okay with that choice? And for me, that was the involuntary separation. For others, that may not be the choice, and that's perfectly fine. But um, that's kind of how it really impacts me.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. I know that can be a bit personal to talk about. Um, I think it's kind of messed up that they're doing like I kind of understand what they're doing with the voluntary involuntary stuff, but it is kind of wild to think that they're saying like, well, if you don't voluntarily leave, you may have to pay back these benefits that you've been essentially promised. It's like breaking a deal, breaking a promise just to try to screw someone over, essentially. Like I really can't understand in what world it would make sense for them. Like they don't need like the $100,000 they give to someone as like a signing bonus. Like let's not pretend that that's like a massive part of the budget for the military. Like that is a penny. Like that's like a drop in the bucket. So it really does just kind of feel like an insult to be like, oh, and you're gonna have to pay that back. Like what?
Sure, and like I said, so there's no guarantee that the invol step they may still say, all right, you don't have to pay this back, but the kind of based on the wording and the way like legal teams look at that, it's like, all right, well, you're guaranteed if you voluntarily separate that you won't have to pay this back. You're rolling the dice if you don't. So and the other thing is just like voluntary or involuntary, either way we're going to be separated. There's no option in this policy that allows us to continue to serve. Even if I said, hey, I will meet all the male standards, I was assigned male at birth, got it. Do I want to do this? Absolutely not. You're taking away part of who I am. But my service is also very important to me. So even if I say, hey, I will meet all these rules that you were telling me, they would still separate me. So there really is no option unless these court cases play out and some stuff happens that allows us to continue to serve.
Gotcha. So I wanted to ask, do you know other trans service members? Like, do you have relationships or know anyone who's in the service that's also trans?
I do. Quite a few actually. So, I'm a member of a group that it's a trans specific military support group. There's a few thousand in that group. I also do a lot of like mentorship and things like that. So I've met, I mean, probably 15 or 20 other trans service members in person. As you know, I travel a lot in my specific career field, so I kind of bounce all over the country. Yeah, yeah, I've met, and we're talking from like lowest ranking, just joined the military, all the way up to like colonels, who have been serving for well over 20 years and are filling key leadership roles.
Okay. We sort of you sort of already answered this question, but essentially, like the way other people would like how many people do you think will be exempt from this ban? Because you mentioned that there was a waiver process, that it's incredibly difficult for anyone to actually get through that. Like how many out of those few thousand people do you think will be able to remain in the military?
So out of the people I personally know, I would say none. So anyone who transitioned after they joined the military is automatically going to have that gender dysphoria diagnosis, because the very first step in transitioning in the previous policy, which, because again, everything is run by policy. So there was a policy in place that said, okay, if you're in and you identify as transgender, this is the policy. And one of the first steps was meeting with a behavioral health specialist and getting that diagnosis. You couldn't do anything else without that diagnosis. So that kind of paints a real broad like stroke for most of us. The other piece of it is like a lot of people have insurance that requires they're using gender dysphoria to prescribe the hormones. There's probably a few other diagnoses that could be in there that they might be able to prescribe under, but the vast majority, it's gender dysphoria is what they use. So, I mean, to check all those boxes, I kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, so in order to check all three of these boxes, you would basically have to be in the closet and not have, you really wouldn't need the waiver unless you raised your hand and said, I have gender dysphoria, because otherwise no one's gonna know it anyway. I
Yeah.
mean, I know at least, on the Air Force side, they're adding a question. So every year we do a health assessment. They're probably going to add a question to that asks, something along those lines to kind of make us identify ourselves. But yeah, it's I would say very few people. I think there was a waiver process last time and there wasn't a single one approved. So
Oh
I
wow.
would not expect to see any approved.
Okay. Yeah. So essentially no one. Everyone's going to be affected by this ban. It's No one's going to be safe from it. It doesn't matter what your situation is or how it came to be, basically, unless, like you said, unless you're closeted and just not out and you haven't pursued anything, then you're going to be hit by this. It's really unfortunate. It's hard to understand what's going through these people's heads.
Sure. Yeah. We haven't seen all of the policy drop yet. So, I say take some of this stuff with a grain of salt, but based on everything I have seen so far, like, I see no way that I will be allowed to continue to serve, no matter what process I try. And I'm in a career field that is considered critical for what I'm doing. But because I don't check those other boxes, you know, I could apply for it, but it'll immediately get denied. It's kind of hard for me to prove that I've never attempted to transition.
Yeah, just like get the Men in Black, like the flashy thing, and just be like erase all their memory. I wanted to ask about like for the way that the military operates. You mentioned that you know a couple service members who are trans who are also in like leadership roles, or really like you yourself, you're in like a pretty critical position. You've been in for a long time, so I'm sure that as time has gone on, you have become more a part of the core of the service and become more important to the service of the military as well. How do you think that this will affect like the operational standards, or what's going on in the military? Like, will there be negative effects to all these people being forced out? Will there be like holes where that in jobs that they can't fill and stuff like that?
Absolutely. So, and this is kind of like a yes and no answer. So, I mean, in the military, we all kind of trained to the mindset of, all right, we're all replaceable. I mean, profession of arms is not a safe profession. So on one hand, you do have this system built where, like, okay, they're going to remove me. Somebody else will be moved into that position. But what you're not replacing is the experience. So when you remove someone, I'll use my own career as an example. So basically what I do now is I plan exercises and very specific things that we need to train to help get airmen and other service members kind of prepared to do their jobs at a high level. I've deployed 3 different times, once to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan. I've worked in a couple of other career fields that give me a very broad picture of what we do in the profession of arms, and kind of just all of that experience is something that's not going to be easily replaceable. You may have a handful of other people that have similar experiences, but in a lot of these cases you just get the right person who fits that right slot, and they'll sit there and do the job. And eventually I would have retired anyway, and they would have had to find someone else. But you also have the cost of training. So I had just seen an article that estimates it's going to cost around $960 million, I think it said, in training to replace all of the folks that they're going to remove. Because again, yes, there are some, younger troops that have, just started their careers, but you're also talking about fighter pilots. You're talking about, engineers. You're talking about IT specialists, avionics specialists, all these things that take a lot of time and money to train. So, with removing that, like, yeah, it's going to create gaps. Will they get filled? Sure. Will you get the same quality? It's probably going to take a little bit of time for those new individuals to kind of, fill those gaps at that same level. And then, kind of the other piece of this, which is more concerning to me, and one of the first things I actually thought about was we're taking a policy that was approved that we were allowed to do, and we're now saying, okay, this is no longer approved. And by the way, even if you followed the rules back when you did this, we're still going to remove you. What that does is it opens up opportunity for people to question trust in the stability of their careers. Trust is so important in the profession of arms and what we do. Like I need to trust in my leadership that if they say, hey Aurora, we need you to go over there and do this thing, and you're probably not going to come back. I have to trust that the reason they're making that decision is because that thing has to happen, and I'm the one who has to do it. We all follow orders, we all follow policy. So along with that, there's already kind of a culture of, especially when we start talking about mental health, there's already a culture of like, hey, I'm not going to, I might be struggling. I might have depression, anxiety, something, it's taken years for us to kind of get away from the idea of, hey, don't tell anybody that because they'll throw you out for it. And now I can see where, like, okay, people who are witnessing what's happening to trans service members, what is it going to be, trans service members? Could it possibly be other issues? And I've seen this talked about in articles too of, what happens if next it's, oh, if you have an anxiety diagnosis. There's so many of us that have PTSD diagnosis. It's setting a, in my opinion, a dangerous precedence of changing the rules after the fact and then punishing those who followed those rules.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point to make. That like there's like there should be an element of trust that if you're going to put your safety on the line, if you're going to make sacrifices for service, that they're going to uphold their end of the bargain. Like with your situation, you upheld your end of the bargain 100%. They really shouldn't. I doubt that anyone that works with you has any complaints about your service or your loyalty or anything, but they're essentially saying that doesn't matter. We're pulling back on our promises, and that's a really good point. That next they could just say, hey, if you're gay, go back to the don't say gay era where it's like you're not allowed to even be openly homosexual in the military. They could target, like you said, anxiety disorders, all sorts of different things, and it's like you're going to have people wondering whether it's safe for them to join, and like whether there's what's the word I'm looking for, like career stability. Something I've been thinking about a lot lately, just like not even just with the military but just with the federal government in general. Right now there's so much chaos with all the layoffs and all the reductions in workforces and all the probationary workers being fired, all this stuff. You're making it so that like no one's going to want to work for the federal government. No one's going to want to enlist in the military. People are not going to feel motivated to do these things because they're going to be worried, like, is there a future here? Is this stable? Is this something that's worth pursuing? And that's a big deal when it comes to stuff like the military, or just being a federal government worker. We need those people to want to do those jobs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, one of the the military is a very challenging career, especially to make it to a full retirement. I mean, it's very hard on you physically and mentally, and that's another thing that kind of stands out to me is all of these questions of fitness. Like we've proven that we can do it. We're doing it today. There were. I know of one individual right now that is deployed in a combat zone that's probably going to get pulled back out of there, but they're doing the job to kind of take the, the one thing that we do have is that stability of, yeah, we are supposed to be fairly stable in our careers. It's scary to, I mean, obviously it impacts me directly, but it's scary to see holistically as well.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm sure at this point you care about what happens in the military. I'm sure at this point, like, there's a little bit of a vested interest there where you've put so much time, effort, energy. You've done so much for it. It feels like kind of like a spitting in your face sort of thing, and just telling you that kind of devotion or dedication like doesn't matter. That's despicable for people that supposedly care about being selfish or like selfless or whatever, and they care about honor and they care about all this stuff. Like, they're being super dishonorable like in this whole venture. Like, they're trying to say trans people are the ones that lack the ability to think about others, but like they're literally they're just harming people for virtually no reason. I wanted to talk about the fact that, like, so the reason why the ban is being put into place, essentially a judge put a block on the ban, because like it's being fought in the courts, it's being fought actively, and the judge basically put a ban saying, let's not implement this, let's not go forward with this ban because we want to play out what's going on in the courts first. Well, the Supreme Court lifted that temporary injunction, essentially allowing them to go forward with the ban while it's still being fought in the courts. I think it's obviously partisan. Like, there's no reason to lift that temporary injunction. Like if they want to do the ban and it gets through the courts and the courts uphold the ban, and the chips will fall where they may, but like, I, it's ridiculous. But I wanted to talk specifically about that because it's kind of a weird situation where like the court cases are going to continue, right? Like this legal battle is going to continue, right?
Yes, absolutely. So there's several cases going on right now. I mean, the kind of the big ones are Schilling and Talbot are the two big cases. So yeah, basically what happened was a federal judge put that injunction in place. A big part of the reason for that injunction is the timelines that we're looking at. Original timeline, it was by March 26th, voluntary separation had to be applied for. After that, it gave the services 30 days to identify anyone who didn't voluntarily separate to start the separation process, and another, I believe it was another 30 days to separate. With the line in the sand date, I believe it was 30 September. So by September 30th, every single trans service member had to be separated. So that injunction kind of just said, all right, well, hold on. This is being questioned in the courts. Let that play out. Realistically, it could take years for these cases to play out to a verdict. You know, we would all be gone by then. We'd all be removed. So it was just kind of giving a little bit of safety on our end to say, all right, well, you know, you won't be removed until whatever court, if it gets pushed back to the Supreme Court, whichever court rules and says whether this is legal or not legal. I'm not a constitutional law expert. I have my opinions, but you know, I won't get into all of that. Um, However, yes, the Supreme Court, I believe it was a 6-3 ruling, if I remember correctly, lifted that injunction. Big impact for me and most of us is, again, let's say that I am separated and these court cases play out, and a year from now, let's say they come back and say, oh, that wasn't legal. My career has already been irreparably damaged. I am a single occupant position, so I will have been replaced by then. They can't give me the job that I had when I left back. They could say, okay, you need to, you know, reenlist these people, or give them the option to, kind of like what we saw with the COVID shot. However, there's a whole bunch of stipulations that come along with that. A big part of my role and a lot of like those upper leadership roles, networking, reputation, things that take years to build, to kind of like knowing the right people to talk to for specific things, and just kind of, it's not something that you can just pluck somebody out of and then a year stick them back in there. So that was kind of the whole point behind the injunction and the danger of it being removed is, you know, once the process is gone through to the end, you know, and then especially if we're talking years, like, you know, I will have moved on with my life by then. I hate to say that. Like, military is a huge part of who I am. It really is. Like, I was planning on doing at least another 10 years. You know, I can't put my life on hold while these court cases go on. I'll need to find a job. I'll need to, you know, all these things to kind of be like, well, you know, in 2 years, hey, you can come back if you want. Well, you're not going to get a whole lot of people for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of trauma associated with this. I mean, it is gut wrenching to watch as a leader, especially, you know, some of the younger airmen. I've had conversations where, you know, they're like, "Hey, what's going to happen to me?" And I have to sit there and be like, you know, I don't know. Just hold your head high and keep doing your job, and things like that. Like it's not a position I ever thought I would be in as, you know, as a leader. And so to put these thousands of people through that process and then, you know, maybe say, okay, oops, this wasn't legal. Like it's kind of a, I didn't expect the injunction to be lifted in the way that it was. I kind of, I guess in my heart, I kind of knew it was going to happen, but I thought there would be at least like a level of like, hold off on the separations. You can implement, you know, X, Y, and Z of this policy, but allow the people who voluntarily separate it to leave, but don't involuntarily separate anyone. Any number of things that had kind of gone through my head, but I just, to see it completely flipped like that, yeah, it was a little disheartening.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's a unique decision that it's like a decision that I think we would only see from this like super partisan Supreme Court that was personally handcrafted by Donald Trump to serve his every whim. It's unfortunate that they didn't do any stopgaps. They didn't do anything to prevent the harm that'll happen to service members, but also to the military in general. Like we've talked about throughout this interview, the way that they're going about this is like almost like maximally harmful to everyone involved and the military. Like you mentioned, the cost of retraining people, the holes that'll be in those positions in the meantime. Like everything about it is just, it's just pretty maximally awful. Basically, what you're saying with the court cases is that even if the court cases rule that it's what they did was illegal, that's really only going to affect like future service members who come out as trans. Anyone who's left, they're probably not going to be able to just go back. And it makes total sense that you mentioned like you're going to have to get a new career, like you have to make money, like you have to sort of move on with your life. Like you don't have the choice to just sit here for 2 years and wait.
Sure, yeah. And again, like with the, I don't know if you're familiar with the COVID vaccine policy that the military had come out with, where basically, you had to get a COVID vaccine. And obviously, there were some people who said, no, I don't want to do that. Slightly different situation because we're not really being given a choice. Like I'd mentioned earlier, it's not like do this or this. It's just, cut and dry. However, where whether it was religious reasons or other, in my personal opinion, valid reasons, if you say, hey, I don't want to do this, but at the end of the day, they were separated for it, and then a few years later we came back and said, all right, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. They offered you can come back, but it's not as simple as just like, hey, here's your job back. So one of the things we do when we join the military is go through a system called MEPS. It's a medical and mental health evaluation to see if you're fit to serve when you first come in. It's a very kind of like head to toe exam, like looking at everything. You have to list out your entire medical history. So in order for those individuals to come back, or let's say even trans individuals down the road, if this policy gets reversed, to come back, they would have to go back through MEPS. They do use what's called the retention standards instead of the accession standard. So accession is, first time person joining. Retention is like, I'm going to re-enlist. However, you would still have to check the box of meeting all of the standards to serve, which if you've been out of the service for several years, it might not necessarily be that easy to do. If a new medical condition came up or any other number of things, you might not even if you wanted to come back, you might not be able to. But again, the other side of that is, if you've already started a new career, you've moved on with your life. I mean, big thing that we kind of haven't talked about is this affects service members, but it also affects our families. Like, there's so many service members who have dependents who might be on, insured through the military. They're going to lose their health insurance. In a lot of cases, they're going to have to move. It's just really disruptive to not only the service member but their family as well. And to go through all of that, finally, come out the other end and then say, oh yeah, I'm gonna go back to that. I just, I don't see it happening. And, I can't say I would blame anyone for that. I feel like, I'm kind of in that boat of like, if I've already moved on with my life, like, gonna risk going back and doing this all again just so in, 4 years, maybe someone else can come in and flip it again. Like it's tough. It's tough. And I mean, yeah, it really, I feel like we're losing a lot of good people. Um, then it's going to be hard to fill those gaps.
Yeah, I certainly believe that, there's a lot of people, a lot of good people who are going to be removed from service for this, and it totally makes sense that they're going to move on with their lives. They're going to do what they need to do to survive, to make money, to support their families, to get health insurance, because we live in a capitalistic system where you gotta keep on that grind. If you stop, then there's not much hope. But it's also that element of like not having trust, like you mentioned, in 4 years from now, it's like who's gonna be president, who's gonna have this ability. Like it's like having your leader be like supremely bipolar or something. And I don't mean to sound ableist with that or anything. I hope no one takes it that way. But just like every 4 years, it's like, oh, you can be trans, you can be gay, like it's all fine, it's all good. And then 4 years later, it's like, no, actually, you're not allowed to do any of that. You're horrible, and you got to get out. It's like that's not a sustainable situation for anybody who is affected by that kind of whiplash. It's just it's going to discourage a lot of people. Like I obviously I'm not going to say who this is or whatever, but I've received a message from someone who was offering to do the interview, but they wanted to like be anonymous about it, because they're closeted in service, and they don't want to get removed from their service. So it's going to encourage a lot of that kind of behavior where someone's going to be like, well, I'll just come out when I'm out of the military, or it's going to create a lot of deception and a lot of like hiding and stuff like that. I find it all pretty disturbing. It's just like where's the positive in all of this? Like you know what I mean? Like they don't the positive is owning the libs is like literally the only thing that the conservatives get out of this situation is feeling like they have like destroyed the woke mind virus or something. What a shallow victory when they've harmed so many lives and ruined so many careers and done so much harm to so many people.
Yeah, it's again, it's obviously it's very personal to me, but like it's I won't say funny, but mentioning like someone else who had talked about wanting to be anonymous. When I first started my transition, as I was starting the process, my stance was like, okay, I don't want to be visible. I don't want to, I'm not that person who's going to be like advocating or doing any of that. I just want to continue serving and I want to do it authentically. My mind has changed in that a little bit in the sense of like I've especially current events, I've realized how important being visible and having a voice is. A lot of the ideas of like, all right, things like trans people serving harm, good order and discipline. I haven't seen that. I interact with a lot of people. Again, I travel all over the country. Interact with a lot of high level leaders. I interact, from the top all the way down to the bottom. I have not really had any issues. Occasionally I get misgendered. Personally, I just let it roll off. Like, I'm sure 90% of the time it's not intentional. I have a deeper voice. I get it. Like, not a big deal. I just kind of keep going about my day. Is there a small percentage of people who have met me are probably, not happy that I'm in uniform? Sure. But you could say that about any other, you could say that about yeah, any other demographic really. So I don't think that we hurt good order and discipline any more than any other service member does. I don't see us hurting readiness. We again, my record proves again, tomorrow I could get on a plane, deploy to wherever they want to deploy me to and go do my job. Fitness standards, we have to meet fitness standards. I mean, I can tell you I can look at my last PT test and whether you grade it by the male or the female standard, I still meet it. So it's not this huge like disparity of hurting readiness and hurting good order and discipline. Um, there's a lot that we bring to this fight. One of the other things that I've learned is being a senior leader is taking care of people. Like a lot of us have gone through it in our lives. We kind of have that empathy and we can connect with our people and make sure, I've always been the kind of person who's take care of the people, they'll take care of the mission. So yeah, all of these things, it's just kind of yeah, I don't see it. I see it in comment sections on Facebook and that's where I see these ideas. But when I'm out there, in the field and doing my job, again, it's kind of we all wear the uniform, we're all doing the job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say thank you in general for being here and talking to me and being willing to do this interview. Like I understand how that's pretty uncomfortable for some people. They don't want to do it. They don't want to be visible. They just want to mind their own business, go about their own life. So I really appreciate you putting yourself out there and making the time to speak to me and talk about all this stuff. Your perspective is very valuable. I've personally learned a ton from talking to you tonight about everything that's going on with this ban and how it's going to be implemented and how it's going to affect people. And I think you've laid out a very clear picture here about what this all looks like and how it's going to affect people. And also thank you for your service. Thank you for sacrifices you've made, everything that you've done. I think that that's really honorable, and so I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And also just on my last point, when I say like I didn't want to be visible, I didn't want to, kind of be vocal, there was never any shame for me. I've never been ashamed of who I am. I never, it was just kind of like I'm a regular, I put my uniform on, I'm just like everybody else. But that shift kind of came when I started seeing a lot of the people maybe don't understand, or, I can't tell you how many times I've had someone say, hey, you're the first trans person I've met, in uniform and kind of like I've had a handful of people come to me and say, "You just meeting you changed my perspective. You're a professional. You showed up here. You know what you're talking about. Like that's not what I pictured in my mind when we talk about transgender people." And I so that to me, that's when it kind of clicked, and I was like, "No, I need people to understand that we're just people." In my case, like I'm just a service member, just like you. Like we're all you know. So that was where that swing came from.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and I get you there. Where it's like, a lot of people just, they just want to live their lives. They just want to do their job. Like no one wants that. Like I don't want to be here, like having to advocate for the rights of our community and fight for basic human dignity and respect. Like I don't want to have to do that, but it is where we're at. So it is what it is, I guess. But one thing I wanted to mention is like you sent me your service record beforehand, and I took a look through everything, and I noticed. I mean, you have a lot of medals, you have a lot of references for some high level people. It's very clear that you have been recognized consistently over and over by the military as being an extremely valuable asset. Like you've been in for a long time, you've been very consistent, you deployed, you got all these medals, and it's clear that you've left a positive impact on everyone who's worked with you, interacted with you, served with you. And so it goes to show how the people who implemented this ban, the people who are doing this, like they don't know you, they don't know what's going on. They are not plugged in. They have not looked at the service records. They have not like this. None of it's based on any reality. It's unfortunate that they're not doing that. That they're not looking through and saying like, oh wow, this person is like a really valuable asset to the military, and what are we doing if we just pluck them out of service and end their career prematurely. It's kind of wild. Like they're just like with their eyes closed, just like writing legislation and throwing it out there.
Yeah, and I mean, I can tell you, I am not the only one. Like I said, I am. My career is mediocre compared to some of the other trans service members I've met, who like test pilots in the Navy, and colonels who are in charge of acquisitions and engineering and all this stuff. But what I can tell you is not a single one of the medals that I've received were based on DEI or any other kind of that idea. I mean, I could sit here and read, they give us a certificate that says what it was awarded for. It lays it out that the data is there, the information is there. It's just choosing to ignore it. But yeah, it's unfortunate, and like I said, there's a lot of talent out there, and I mean, one thing this there's been a lot of horrible for me personally that has come out of this, but one thing that I really has humbled me is the amount of people who have reached out to me and said, "Hey, I will write you an impact statement. Hey, I will come testify on your behalf. I will, we'll find a way to keep you. Like we really value having you on our team." And like incredibly humbling to have so many people who are willing to just immediately, without questioning it, come forward and offer that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it makes sense because you've made an impact. And so there are probably people who have experienced that, and they want to do what they can to help you out. And it's too bad that the the current administration just does not care. Like they could not care any less about like your career or what's going on there, unfortunately. Do you have any advice or anything you'd like to say to members of our community during these hard times? And you could be speaking specifically to people that are serving or in the military, or you could just be talking to our community as a whole.
Yeah, so I mean, in the military, but this does apply to everyone. We talk about resiliency a lot, and kind of like I touched on it a little bit earlier, where said, that individual had come to me, and it was just kind of like, hey, asking what's going to happen to me. Like that is an incredibly stressful thing to feel, and even in my position, like that not knowing, and I've been around for a while and have support systems, just all of these things, the unknown, the the constant barrage of just bad news or all these things happening can be incredibly overwhelming. So I mean, one, embrace community, find ways to help each other. Even if it's just again, I try to consistently offer, like, I'm here, come talk to me, send me a message. And in the support groups I'm in, I'm constantly throwing that out there of, we kind of, we're going to lift each other up. Is it going to be hard? Yeah, it's going to be hard. The other thing is, kind of, if you can safely do it, be visible and have a voice. I mean, obviously that's a personal choice that everyone has to make, whether they're comfortable with it, whether it's safe for them to do it. Maybe you live in an area where it's not safe for you to do, or maybe you're in one of those circumstances where, like, hey, if I do this, it's going to end my career, or these other things. But I truly, truly feel that, telling our stories and letting people see, hey, we're just regular people. We're not, we just want to live our lives and do our jobs. And, I didn't join the military for a paycheck. I didn't join the military. That was my dream from when I was, for as long as I can remember, that was my dream growing up. And, yeah, kind of weird circumstances. I was graduating high school, didn't know what to do, so I jumped right into it. But, like, I didn't stick around for 18 years and go through some of the things that I've gone through and make those sacrifices because, I for a paycheck. That's not why we do these things. And, I just that applies to everyone, right? No matter what you're doing, no matter where you're at. Like, I find it incredibly hard to believe that anyone is sitting anywhere going, what would be fun? Let me transition. That seems like a lot of fun. Like, it's not easy. And even when it is easy, even when you have that joy, there's always, like, at least for me, I always have that kind of question of, like, why was that person looking at me the way they were? Or why did this happen? So, yeah, I mean, community, visibility, and have a voice. And if you're in a position where you can be visible and have a voice, do it for those who can't. Because, like I said, we not all of us can, but I think if things are going to change, that's how they're going to change. And we're your neighbors, we're your, family, we're your, your siblings in arms, your coworkers, whatever it is. Like, you know, it it's easy to look at a word and say that's a bad thing, but, when you look at the human that's behind that word, it kind of, at least in my opinion, that's where change is going to come from.
Yeah. No, a beautiful answer. Honestly, I agree wholeheartedly. That's one of the things I talk about the most with my platform. Because I feel like now more than ever, it's vitally important that we do everything we can to normalize our community and humanize us in the eyes of everyone who doesn't know who a trans person is or has never met a trans person. Like, I do live in a red state. I live in Ohio, and I've had that experience of, like a lot of people that I know in my work life and my personal life have never met a trans person before. I'm the only one they've ever met. They think so, they've probably interacted with
Yeah,
a trans
yeah,
person
it's
before,
usually
but they just didn't
yeah,
realize it at the time. But it's one of those things where you would be shocked. Like, you go online and you see the way people talk about us, and you see the way people interact with each other, and you think there's no hope. These people are all rooted in and supremely principally bigoted, and they just don't care. But that's not how people are in real life. I'm convinced, a lot of those things, like a lot of those comments, are like Russian bots trying to, like, spur like unrest in our country. But also, like, even if those are real people, they're an incredibly small part of the population. They're just like hyper online and hyper involved with the comment sections and stuff. But, like, I've met so many people, even Republicans, even conservatives, even Christians, like, whatever, doesn't matter who someone is. They meet me, they realize I'm a person, and then it puts a face to the things that are happening, and they realize, like, oh wow, like, when this person when something like a military ban goes into effect, they think, they don't think of me as like a service member or anything, but they realize, like, I'm just a normal person. There's nothing wrong with me because I'm transitioning. It doesn't make me, like, unfit to do anything. It's really important. Organizing and visibility, I think, are the two things that our community needs now more than ever. I've said this before in a couple pieces of content, and I'm going to keep saying it probably because I want it to be true. But I feel like if there's anything that's going to come out of this administration and this hateful movement and this pushback that we're experiencing, is like if they're going to put all this attention on us, and try to bring all this like this fight to our lives, we need to try to capitalize on that attention and start a movement and start something that can help put our protections into place, because what's going on right now is unsustainable for our community. Like 800 bills a year, people being forced out of government jobs, people being forced out of their service. That's not sustainable for our community, and it's really not sustainable for society either. I think that if anything good were to come out of everything that's happening, is that eventually, hopefully, we can create a civil rights movement that can push for like either federal or just protections in more states, to keep our community safe, so that we don't have to deal with this in the future. We don't have to worry about like, oh my God, are they going to draft a bill that makes it impossible for me to live my life? It's very hopium. It's definitely one of those things where it's like, oh, like you're just saying that because things are so dark right now. But like, I think it's really it depends on how our community reacts to what's going on. Like they want us to be afraid. They want us to throw ourselves back in the closet. They want us to give up. They want us to remove ourselves from public life. If we refuse to do all that and organize, there's very little that they can do to stop us from creating a civil rights movement that will change the future for our community. I mean, that's what Stonewall was all about. You know, when Stonewall was happening, it was literally illegal to be trans in public. It was a very different world, and despite that fear and despite the efforts to try to keep people like us silent, we organized and we did something that really changed the future for our community in a positive way. So I'm hoping that we can harness that kind of energy right now. I think that I know I'm going on quite a bit here, but I feel like s- the past 10 years or so, we've seen a lot of progress, but we've also seen like, I don't want to say complacency in our community, but we don't live in the era of pre-Stonewall where like it's not as dire as it used to be in terms of like not all of us are being forced onto the streets as prostitutes, for example. And that was basically the only way to survive pre-Stonewall, was to try to get involved with street business because you couldn't get a legitimate job, you couldn't live a legitimate life. I think that there's like an element of complacency where essentially we've gotten used to things being the way that they are, that we're not as afraid, we're not as worried about our rights. Maybe we stopped fighting for them as much as we used to because it's just not as necessary, but really it's becoming just as necessary now as it was back then for us to stand up and fight. I appreciate your sentiment. I appreciate how you answer that question. I very much agree that there's a lot we need to be doing right now, and not everyone can do it. But for those of us that have the ability, getting out there, being visible, even just in your own personal life, is huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, it really is. And yeah, you kind of nailed it with all that. So, I mean, I don't really have anything else to tack onto that except for maybe, I'll throw another militarism out there of we've lost some battles recently. Probably gonna lose a few more, but the war's not over. And, I personally will keep fighting for each and every one of us for as long as I possibly can. Be it trans service members, be it the trans community, be it Americans as a whole. Like, my service is not conditional. I used to tell people, sure, yeah, I fight for your right to hate me. Like that's just part of it.
All right. And so now we are back from the interview. That went really well. I was really happy to hear from her. I mean, I learned a ton of stuff. I definitely feel like I've come out of this interview more informed, more able to understand and empathize with trans service members who are going through something incredibly difficult right now. I forgot to ask Aurora during the interview if she had anything she wanted to plug, and she actually had something really important that I would like to give some airtime to. She has essentially a profile. It's like a website It'll be linked in the description of the video. It's called transmilitaryvoices.com. And it's just trying to document and catalog trans service members, their service, about, just like short blurbs about them, maybe stories if they feel like sharing. I feel like that's a really important thing right now. I feel like hearing their stories, understanding what they have been through, what they have done for our country, everything like that. That's all very important. So I'm very happy to share that. And I hope that you all take a look at it and read through it and get an idea of the people that are being targeted by this ban. I think that this is a good opportunity for us to, as we talked about in the interview, come together and support each other. So please do take a look at that. But if you're looking for links related to my content, it is definitely also there in the description of the video. You just open the description of the video, you scroll down, you will see a link tree. You click that and it opens up. It's got all of my social media stuff in there. I'm mostly active on YouTube, but I do have a Discord, which is in that link tree. And if you want to join, we would love to have you in there. Aurora's in there. So I did ask her for permission about this. But if you want to, if like you're a trans service member, or if you just want to wish her well or whatever, you're more than welcome to join the Discord. And she said her DMs are open, so you can go ahead and contact her and give her some words of support. Yeah, I super encourage people to get involved with the Discord. It's a wonderful support network. I know a lot of people get a lot of value out of it. It definitely helps with that anxiety and feeling of loneliness that a lot of us are struggling with during these dark times. So we spend a lot of effort trying to make sure it's a good space for everybody. So please join in. We would love to have you there. I also have a Patreon, and my Patreon is the funding mechanism for my channel. It's the reason I'm able to underpay an editor currently, which is necessary because editing the content myself was very quickly burning me out. So I have to thank everyone who's a Patreon subscriber, everyone who gives money every month. You're all doing an incredible job of making this possible for me. I want to produce more content. I want to produce better content, and the Patreon is the way forward with that. It's the funding mechanism for everything that I do. So if you feel like you can give a couple bucks a month, if you feel like you can give a little more than that, whatever is comfortable for you. I know that economically things are not fantastic right now, so I don't blame anyone if you can't afford to do that. If you can't afford to give anything like money, then please subscribe to the channel, like this video, comment down below, let me know what you thought of the interview. Engage with my content, share it to your friends. All of that stuff is a free way to support my content that helps, honestly, just as much as giving money to me. Like if you share my video on your social media and get 10, 20 people to watch it, get whatever, like that's all really important. So I appreciate any support that anyone's willing or able to give. And yeah, huge shout out to my Patreon people, all the patrons to my Patreon. Their names will be flashing up on the screen right now. That's why I'm making these hand gestures to indicate flashing. And yeah, those are all of the Patreon subscribers who are not my top tier. Now I want to go ahead and shout out my top tier Patreon subscribers. So my top tier supporters are my super supporters. They give the most out of everyone in my community, and I super duper appreciate everything that they do for me. So I want to go ahead and shout out those super supporters right now. We have Andrea Uhara, Yucatan, Kira, Sophie's Dead Name Walking, Ultraviolet Voodoo, Chastity, Kate, Fiona Dobson, Cal Fiore, Jasmine Wilson, Maddie, Trisha Pizzafred, Katie Bug, Sarah J. Buck, Nikki Notzel, and Sarah. So again, thank you all so very, very much for your support. It means the world to me. You're making this possible for me. You're making it possible for me to continue this fight and continue my efforts. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up this video. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. Despite the dark times that we're living in, you got to find time for joy. You got to find time for self-care. So please do a little self-care, do a little something that you enjoy. Try to make the best of your day. And I just have a one more simple request, one more little thing that I'd like to demand of you. That is for you to drink some water.